So Bass Reeves. Badass Bass Reeves. He was a Confederate soldier. Bass Reeves was an ex-slave, so he was fighting along his Confederate master in the very beginning of the U.S. Civil War. Bass Reeves, talk about humble origins. Talk about being on, being on board on the wrong side of tracks. I love Bass Reeves stories. I love Bass Reeves stories. Bass Reeves, he got Frank Smith and Jim Webb. He's got so many goddamn fucking criminal fucks. He got the three Brunner brothers. He got some racist bootlegger's bodyguard. He got Robert Dozier. He got Tom Story. Tom Story, Robert Dozier. He cracked some fugitive on the run's neck. Here's the Bass Reeves story. So, he was called in by his fellow deputy U.S. Marshals to help smoke out a stubborn fugitive. After an hours-long shootout, the outlaw, the criminal, said fuck it and decided to make a run for it. The rest of the posse started shooting at the outlaw, but they could not get him. They could not get the criminal. As he's running across the field, they were missing, says Burton, and Deputy U.S. Marshal Bud Ledbetter hollered, "Get him, Bass Reeves!" And Bass Reeves, he just said coolly and calmly, "Oh, I'm going to break his neck." And then he took out his Winchester rifle, and from a distance of a quarter of a mile, 1,000 foot, 1,500 foot, shot and broke the man's neck. The Black Badge, where he got the name The Black Badge, this is a book that was written by Judge Paul L. Brady. The first person that he killed called him a Black Badge. And so you have Bass Reeves was going to arrest some bootlegger, and his armed bodyguard had been selling whiskey, so he tried to arrest the bootlegger. The bootlegger was okay. He surrendered, but his armed bodyguard said that he wasn't going to let he said that a black badge don't mean a damn thing to me. And then he swung his rifle towards Bass Reeves, and in the middle of this swing, he was sitting in the driver's chair, so he's going to pull the rifle towards Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves pops him twice, 2 bullets right into the chest, and then he was dead before he fell out of the driver's seat. So he pulls the rifle, bang, bang, before he even falls to the ground. So that's the first person that Bass Reeves had killed. And then, of course, the Brunner brothers. That was incredible. Bass Reeves is chasing some other people. And this is in 1884, too. So you had 1884, Jim Webb got killed. Frank Smith got killed in 1884. The Brunner brothers got killed in 1884. So while riding the Seminole Whiskey Trail, he come across the Brunner brothers, and they tried to, rob him at gunpoint, not knowing who he was. And then bang, bang, bang. All 3 of them bit the dust. So they deserve to die. Robert Dozier deserved to die. Tom Story deserved to die. They were criminals. They were murderers, thieves, sadistic, low-life pieces of shit that went around harming, hurting, abusing, bullying others. So the whole point about knowing Bass Reeves is the whole point of knowing history. The whole point of knowing Bass Reeves is the whole point of knowing about Willis Russell. Howard Zinn says that, there's a lot of bullshit out here, so the ones that are able to machete through all the bullshit, that's the ones that you can actually learn from, and that's the point of history. That's the point of history. It's not from the top, from the top down, it's from the bottom up. So this is about Bass Reeves and how Bass Reeves, he got Jim Webb. He got Jim Webb. At first, Jim Webb surrendered, goes to court, faces, all the charges and what have you. In spite, Bass Reeves is going to kill his, posse, not his, Jim Webb. Hold on, give me a second here. So this is about Bass Reeves and Jim Webb. So Jim Webb is this foreman of this huge Washington McLish ranch in the Chickasaw Nation. So you got Jim Webb And you got, you know, a black preacher who's right next to Jim Webb, owns a small farm adjacent to the big old ranch, but he had a fire, got out of control, got on Jim Webb's ranch land. Jim Webb scolds the black preacher, says, you know, don't you do that again, but that wasn't good enough for Jim Webb. Jim Webb wanted vengeance, so Jim Webb went over to the black preacher's house, and he murdered the black preacher. So, what is going to happen now? Well, now he's going to get a warrant for his arrest. Bass Reeves is on the trail. Now Bass Reeves is on the trail, so Jim Webb's a Texas ranch farmhead. A farmhand, four-man, gone bad. A bully quickly accelerated arson and murder. So you had Floyd Wilson and Bass Reeves. So Bass Reeves with his posseman, Floyd Wilson, caught up with Frank Smith in a ranch house in their jurisdiction. Confronted by a loaded revolver in Jim Webb's hand, Bass Reeves smacked the gun away, grabbed Jim Webb in a chokehold with his left hand while drawing with his right hand and shoving the gun into Jim Webb's face. Gasping for breath, the fugitive Jim Webb surrenders, but Jim Webb's partner Frank Smith, he does not. Frank Smith fires 2 shots at Bass Reeves, both missing. Judge Brady writes with Jim Webb completely controlled by his left hand, Bass Reeves fired 1 shot, and Frank Smith fell to the ground. The fight burned out of him by a .45 slug in his abdomen. Still gripping Jim Webb's throat, Bass Reeves instructed Floyd Wilson to handcuff Jim Webb, then mapped plans to return his prisoners to the court in Paris, Texas. But Smith is going to die en route from Reeves' bullet. So Frank Smith is going to get killed by Bass Reeves. So now Frank Smith is killed. That was his, main guy, right? Jim Webb has now been arrested. Now Jim Webb is he's going to, bail out, but he doesn't come back to court. He bonded out. So Bass Reeves turns Jim Webb over to the proper authorities at jail, and then he, goes on his way. Time is going to pass. And that time, the Robert Dozier shooting is going to occur, and Bass Reeves learned that Jim Webb had posted bail after he had been in jail for many months. The foreman jumped his bond. Bass Reeves went on the man's trail again. In June 1884, Bass Reeves located Jim Webb at Bywater store at the foothills of the Arbuckle Mountains. Jim Webb refused to surrender this time, and the 2 men had a running gunfight. The trail ended in a rifle duel, with Jim Webb firing the first 4 shots at Bass Reeves, who was on horseback. Those bullets reportedly clipped the brim of Bass Reeves' hat, grazed his saddle horn, cut a button off of his coat, and shot the reins out of his hands. His horse-shied Bass Reeves dove to the ground with his rifle and returned fire, and then Jim Webb fell to the ground. According to the biographer Brady, it was later discovered all 3 bullets had hit Webb's body within a hand's width of each other. After nearly being shot himself, Bass Reeves got down from his horse, raised his Winchester, and shot Jim Webb twice from a distance of about a quarter mile. Several cowboys and the owner of the store witnessed this gunfight. So Bass Reeves downed Jim Webb, downed the outlaw. Both Jim Bywaters and John Cantrell were eyewitnesses to this shooting. The latter wrote down that the dying gunman's last word on the back of a freight receipt. He said that Jim Webb called Bass Reeves a brave man, and he wanted Bass Reeves to have his revolver and holster. His last words, according to Jim Bywaters, were, "I've killed 11 men, 4 of them in Indian territory, and I expected to make you the 12th. Brady perhaps significantly doesn't mention the distances involved in the Jim Webb killing. However, historian Art Burton reveals Bass Reeves' account. "I shot twice. He dropped, and when I picked him up, I found my 2 bullets had struck within a ½ inch of each other. He shot 4 times, and every shot he kept running up closer to me. He was 500 yards away from me when I killed him." So that's Bass Reeves and Jim Webb. That's the Bass Reeves and Jim Webb story. So there you go. Bass Reeves is a badass. 3,000 arrests. Best day.